All right. Just a couple more seconds. Got to make sure it works. Sorry. Awesome. Okay. All right. Welcome everybody to the fourth presentation for NBTI today. This is Deanna Leonard. She is a marine biologist with the Institute of Marine Research in Norway. And
the title of her presentation is It's a Bird, It's a Plane, It's a Supermarine Mammal.
And we have one thing. We'd like to thank you all for joining us for the observance of International Women and Girls in Science Day. My name is Emma. I am a student with who's helping out with NBTI, and this is
Amber.
And we are so excited that Deanna is here with us today. So let's hear what she has to say.
Hello, everyone. I just want to firstly say thank you so much for the honor of participating in this event, and particularly to celebrate the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. What an awesome thing. So my presentation today is titled, It's a Bird, It's a Plane, It's a Super Marine Mammal. And I've noticed that there's a bit of an obsession with superheroes in our society. I think as human beings, we are drawn to the surreal and the amazing and the unbelievable. And in fact, I myself was a huge Superman fan as a kid. And I think I wrote in my kindergarten journal that I wanted to grow up to be Superwoman myself. So in the last 25 years, I've built a career studying and working with marine mammals. And I consider myself to be a bit of an expert on them as well. So in this presentation, I'm going to make my best scientific argument as to why marine mammals are in fact superheroes, and that they are even better because they are real. So let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, Exhibit A. Here you see an image of Aquaman underwater. You'll notice that he doesn't need air in this case. He is an air-breathing mammal, but he doesn't need air. He travels at high speeds without any concern for pressure or, small issues like getting the bends, like most humans have when they're diving. And I noticed that superheroes seem to have the ability to break all the laws of physics. So they're not subject to constraints of gravity, pressure, thermodynamics, and that's what makes them super. But where's the recognition for the lowly marine mammal sidekick in the picture here, who can already do these things? So you may already know or have heard that marine mammals are incredible divers. This here is an image of sperm whales, a sperm whale, and they are known as one of the deeper diving and longest diving animals. They actually have a record dive depth of 2,250 meters, and they can hold their breath for over 2 hours. But sperm whales are actually only the third deepest diver. So the second deepest diver is actually the southern elephant seal in Antarctica, and they can dive around 2,400 meters. And the record deepest diver is the Cuvier's beaked whale, and they can dive almost 3,000 meters. 2,992 is the record. And that particular species is also the record holder for the longest dive. So the Cuvier's beaked whale can hold its breath for 3 hours and 28 minutes. And just for perspective, a mere mortal human being, and this is an incredible feat in itself, the record for a free diver who has been training their entire lives to hold their breath can actually has broken the record for 24 minutes and 37 seconds and a maximum depth of 214 meters. So just to put that into perspective, this is huge. So how do they do it? Well, marine mammals have something special called a dive response. So when they decide to go down on a dive, their heart rate actually slows by 90%. And so in some cases, just 1 beat per minute. And that helps them conserve oxygen on these dives. Then the blood, because of course we need oxygen throughout this dive. We can't run out of oxygen. We know what happens when we run out of oxygen, we faint. The blood is shunted to the key organs. That's the brain and the heart, but the rest of the body, the oxygen is conserved and it's shut down. So it doesn't flow to the skin and the limbs, for example. They also have very large amounts of blood. And they have a very large spleen, which is actually a storage or a blood bank for the animal. So they can actually store extra blood in their body. So when they go out down on these dives, they can access those reserves. Now, of course, under pressure, things compress. If you've ever been on an airplane and you try to open your water bottle, or it shrinks into a small mass when you go up and you descend and you go up and down, these pressure changes cause air to expand and compress. So for an animal that has lungs, which contain air, they need a flexible rib cage, unlike us. And in addition, their lungs collapse. So they completely collapse, compressing out all of the air, and the air moves into their trachea. And so that prevents gas exchange. And their lungs are actually muscular. So unlike us, we have a diaphragm that moves up and down to pump our lungs. Their lungs themselves are a muscular sac that it can expand quickly to refill and then compress quickly to breathe out very fast. And in addition, they have extremely, if you've ever seen a whale's meat or images of a whale's meat, their meat is almost black, their flesh, and that's because it contains oxygen itself. So you may know that the blood carrying component of the oxygen carrying component of our blood is hemoglobin, and that's what gives it the red color. And so they have a lot of hemoglobin, or what we call myoglobin, in their muscles. So their muscles are an additional store for oxygen. So that allows their muscles to keep working while they're not getting access to blood on these dives. And then something really neat that marine mammals have is something we call the rete mirabilis, which means miracle net in Greek. And these are special capillary beds that help trap the gas bubbles as a whale surfaces. So you may have heard of the bends. This is an issue when you go down on a deep dive. A diver might go down, and as they come back up to the surface, bubbles form in the gas because of the decreased pressure, and that can cause all kinds of problems, including death. So for whales, they have these special little capillary nets that actually are designed to be really small and trap gas bubbles as they come back to the surface. So this allows them to have these incredibly deep dives, incredibly long dives as well. And in addition to diving deep and diving for very long periods, they're also some species in particular are extremely fast dives. So they are known for something called hawking or speed diving. In particular, the pilot whale, which you can see here in this graph, is a depiction of dives. And what you can see in the colors here represent speed. And you can see right here in the red circle, this is what we call a vertical attack. So the animal is diving deep, almost to 1,000 meters here, as you can see in the graph. And their speed at depth increases to about 35 kilometers per hour or about 25 miles per hour. Now, maybe that doesn't seem super fast, but imagine they're moving in water, which is, that's incredibly fast speed. And in addition, they're doing it without air. So this is all using just the oxygen that they have stored in their body and the reserves that they have. So this extremely fast dive bombing, they can do it at a depth of 1,000 meters, and they're usually short dives. And it's thought that they may actually be using this very high cost foraging for feeding on very fast moving prey, including potentially even giant squid. Another way that marine mammals are super, you may be aware, is that they are super sized. They are the largest animals on the planet. They seem to defy physics this way by being absolutely enormous. So how big are they? One blue whale weighs 2,000 or up to 70 kilograms, or weighs up to 2,667 human beings that weigh about 70 kilograms, about the equivalent. And a blue whale is 33 meters long, and its weight can be 175,000 kilograms. Apologize for the metric there for my American friends. So how do they get so big? Well, one way they do it is by taking a shortcut on the food chain. So here you can see killer whales as the top marine predators, but you'll notice conspicuously, animals tend to start very small at the bottom of the food chain and get big at the very top. But our large whales, they actually take a shortcut in the food chain. And they do this through specialized filter feeding. By being able to feed on very small organisms, they can extract more energy out of the system and get much, much bigger. And they do this through a variety of specializations. One technique for our large baleen whales is a technique called gulping. And what they can do is they actually have expandable throat pleats. Looks like a bit like a bullfrog. This is a fin whale here. So they have these grooves on the bottom of their neck that make up about a third of the body, and they can expand out, and they can actually engulf up to 70 tons of water. When they do this, their mouth opens and expands just like this, and they can actually almost unhinge their lower jaw. So the joint between the bones of their lower jaw actually is unfused, and they can extend their mouth open 90 degrees. And this allows them to consume huge amounts of food. So for example, a blue whale that feeds on small zooplankton called krill can actually consume between 4 and 6 tons of krill every single day by doing this. So they get a lot of food in a short period of time, and they get very big as a result. Another species that feeds through filter feeding, but not through gulping, another method called skimming. These are our right whales. This particular image shows a bowhead whale in the Arctic. And instead of gulping the food in the water, what they do is they open their mouth, and the krill or the copepods flow through the middle of the opening in their mouth, and the water flows out the sides of their long baleen, and all of the food is trapped on the inside. So they just skim the water continuously. And in order to do this, they have very special baleen. These are the plates that hang from the upper jaw. They can be 15 meters long, and that allows them to consume between 3 and 4 tons of copepods every single day. And just to give you an example of how big that is, here's a person standing next to a single plate of baleen. So they hang down like a comb or like a mustache from the upper jaw. Of course, superheroes are known for having super senses. As we all know, Superman has very sensitive hearing, and you may also know that marine mammals, some species, have also very sensitive hearing. So you may have heard of echolocation. This is something that marine mammals can use to see underwater using sound. So what they do is they produce a click, a small repetitive click sound. That sound travels out in the water, because sound happens to travel 25 times faster in water than it does in air. So it will extend out, bounce off objects like a fish, and come back. And when they hear that sound, you'll notice that whales don't have external ears. When they hear that sound, they actually hear the sound through their lower jaw. So this is a picture here of the lower jaw of a beluga whale. And the way they hear and the way they channel that sound is through oil. So the lower jaw is filled with oil. Here you can see an empty cavity, very thin lower jaw, and it's filled with oil, and that transmits the sound directly from the water and directly to the inner ear. And that gives them extreme sensitivity to sound. And in addition to being able to hear sound underwater incredibly well, they also have the ability, something similar to Superman, they have their own sort of X-ray vision. So the way this works, as we know, Superman can see through steel. Marine mammals that use echolocation can actually see through physical bodies. And this works similar to the way an ultrasound works. So if everyone is familiar with an image like this of a human baby, and this image is produced through echolocation, technically. They use an ultrasound, and that sends sound waves into a mother's belly. Those sounds bounce back, and they tell you something about how the sound traveled. And so they can actually learn about the density of an object. So a dolphin, for example, trained in an aquarium, is able to detect whether objects are hollow or solid. And it's actually been shown that pregnant females, human pregnant females, swimming with dolphins, the dolphins can actually see through their belly and detect the baby inside. So wild dolphins are able to detect other pregnant female dolphins, and this is useful for finding fish, because they can detect fish by sounds bouncing off their air-filled swim bladders and things like that. So they can actually learn a lot by measuring the density of objects underwater. And their echolocation is so sophisticated that they're actually able to detect something as small as a piece of fishing line that's 100 meters away from them. So it's extremely accurate. And in addition to having extremely sensitive hearing, some marine mammals actually produce some of the loudest sounds on Earth. So the blue whale can produce sounds of 188 decibels. And some of these low frequency calls can travel 500 to 1,000 miles underwater. And in addition to traveling far, some species like the sperm whale can produce sounds that are considered to be the loudest sounds of any animal on Earth, up to 230 decibels. So this is the loudest animal, almost as loud as some of the loudest sounds like earthquakes. In addition, I've noticed in my study of superheroes that they often work together in super teams. And there are advantages to this, of course. Our most successful marine mammals also formed super teams. You may be familiar with pods of killer whales, pods of pilot whales. These animals have huge advantages by working together as a team. So they have extreme social cohesion. And the way this works in marine mammal groups is that they form what are called matrilineal, or groups that are formed under the female. So it's the mother and then her offspring will stay together their entire lives. And they have extreme group behaviors, and they defend each other. And in fact, so aggressively so with pilot whales that they're actually put themselves in extreme danger. So pilot whales are sort of famous in the news for mass strandings, where you see a lot of animals washed up on beaches. And part of the reason why that often happens is that when one animal is in danger, all of the other animals within that family, within that pod, will swim towards the other animal as an attempt to rescue it, as an attempt to defend it, and they find themselves in the same situation. So that is part of the reason why that happens. And when pilot whales were studied for impacts, negative impacts from Navy sonar, what researchers initially found was that instead of swimming away from the sound that was loud and could potentially cause hearing damage, instead of swimming away, they would swim toward it. And at first, this was quite a bit puzzling because researchers understood the frequency of hearing for these species and figured they must be able to, why would they be drawn toward it rather than fleeing and moving away? And this is because they have this, again, this defensive behavior. Because they work together as a super team, they huddle together and they swim toward the sound in an attempt to mob the enemy. So the sound was offensive, it was a potential danger, it was harming them. And the response, instead of swimming away from danger together as a group, swimming toward it in something something researchers now coin mobbing behavior. And this has actually been shown as a defense mechanism that pilot whales exhibit when they're being attacked by the top predator of the sea, killer whales. So instead of swimming away, the pilot whales will actually mob the killer whales and swim toward them as their own defense by working together. And I couldn't not mention, especially on this particular day of International Women and Girls, that superheroes seem to have super moms. Where would Superman be without his amazing mother who sacrificed everything multiple times to save his butt? So marine mammals also exhibit a lot of reliance on their mothers for their incredible abilities and skills. Killer whale mothers, for example, are considered to be some of the best mothers of any animal in the animal kingdom. So they nurse their young, and the young will stay with them their entire lives, and they will care for their young, not just until they're 18 and ready to move off for college, but their entire lives, continuing throughout their adulthood and into old age. And it's not just mothers that play a role in raising super killer whales, also grandmothers. The grandmother killer whales are so important to raising their young offspring that they actually have shown through a study that a young killer whale, its survivability is greatly reduced if it loses its grandmother, even more so than if it loses its own mother. So in other words, the grandmother is so critical to the survival of a young killer whale, and that they need them to reach adulthood. And for this reason, killer whales are one of 3 species on Earth that the females go through something called menopause. And most people don't necessarily know what the purpose of menopause is, but some theories, at least the most accepted theories, are that this investment in grandmothers, when grandmothers or older females of the species stop reproducing their own and having their own children, they then exist into old age and are available to raise the grandchildren. So this is the grandma strategy. And there are only 3 species on Earth that do this: short fin pilot whales, killer whales, and another species you may be familiar with, human beings. So just those 3 species have true grandmothers that invest completely. And with killer whales, it's such an investment that it ensures that multi-generational survival. The grandmothers, the older females, are actually able to nurse the young. So they're able to continue to lactate well beyond their reproductive years. And they live to about 90 and possibly older, similar to a lifespan of a human being. So in addition to that, I've noticed with superheroes that they all seem to have a unique ability, a super ability, whether it's speed, strength, or flexibility. And marine mammals, looking at the marine mammal world, I've noticed a similar pattern. So when it comes to super speed, we have the fastest large whale. This is a fin whale, and it's called the greyhound of the sea, or it's nicknamed the greyhound of the sea. They can travel burst speeds of up to 50 kilometers per hour or 25 knots in water that's extremely fast. And they can do this because they have extreme adaptations. So their bodies are long and slender. They're built like a rocket. And they also have a large dorsal fin on the back. Similar designs you may have noticed in airplanes, for example, that move quickly. This dorsal fin, large dorsal fin, acts as a cutwater, allowing them to move at high speeds and stay stable in the water. For strength, I've noticed that we have some very tanky looking whales. So this is a bowhead whale, and instead of being fast, it is the powerhouse of the marine mammal world. So they live in the Arctic, and the bowhead whale is able to break through ice that is 2 meters thick, using its thick skull and extremely powerful body. So their large tail, which is 1/3 the length of their body, makes them very powerful. So they have intensive burst speed, but they're not very fast overall. When it comes to flexibility, the king of maneuverability and flexibility is the humpback whale. Many people's favorite animals because of a lot of their acrobatic behaviors that you see at the surface. And the reason humpback whales in particular have this special flexibility and maneuverability is because of the way their body is designed. So they have a few key features. One, if you zoom in here and look at the head of a humpback whale, they have these little bumps. And these little bumps have a purpose. They break up what we call lamellar flow, or friction that the surface of the water moving across the body creates. So they break that up. Think about a golf ball. They have little divots, and that is intentional. Those divots help the golf ball move faster through the air. And so humpbacks have a similar design on their bodies. This allows them to turn and twist and cut through the water without resistance. Then they have these long paddles. So their flippers are extremely long, up to 17 feet, a few meters in length. And they're extremely long. That allows them to twist and turn and maneuver and spin. And the leading edge of the fin also has these little divots as well that help break up that flow. And then the tail. The tail of the humpback whale has little divots or bumps, and that's on purpose. That allows the tail to twist and turn for maneuverability as well. And this design is so unique in the animal kingdom that we as human beings have learned a lot about it. And we've actually taken some of these lessons and brought them into engineering. So the technology of the humpback whale flipper, for example, you can see here a round edge versus a ribbed edge or a bumped edge. And that trailing edge breaks up the friction, and engineers have actually mimicked the flipper of a humpback whale in the design of windmills. So the windmill has similar, the leading edge of a windmill has similar bumps like this, and that allows the windmill to move more freely with less friction in the air. And what that means for a humpback whale is that they have this incredible maneuverability. So they're able to spin in circles like this. What you're seeing on the left image is a series of bubbles in what we call a bubble net. And humpbacks are able to form tight circles underwater, releasing bubbles that act as a net to scare schooling fish and prey up to the surface and corralling them together. And then the second image is those same whales swimming up through the middle of that bubble net and capturing their prey. And it allows them to do incredible things like this. This is what we call a spinning head breach. They're the only animals that can do this, where they come completely out of the water, their entire body leaving the water in a corkscrew fashion. So they twist, flying in a circular motion out of the water like a corkscrew, and they are launching 45,000 tons of mass into the air. And many people ask why they do this. Lots of different reasons. Not a marine mammal space program exactly, but for play, to aid digestion, to help remove ectoparasites, and various things, and being a very social species, lots of social reasons to do it, and a behavior we often see younger animals and calves engaging in while their parents are busy feeding. So for lots of different reasons, and mostly because they can, they're showing off. They have this incredible ability that other marine mammals don't have. We occasionally see other whales breaching, but usually only when there's a lot of really rough seas and wind. They can use the waves to help launch their bodies out of the water. But humpbacks are the only ones that can do it like this on a flat, calm day, just using the power of their bodies and their incredible maneuverability to spin around and launch themselves out of the water. And something else I've noticed about superheroes, they have this sort of invincibility. They never seem to die. Here you see Superman moving incredibly close to the sun, no worries about solar radiation, never seen him put sunblock on, pretty sure he's invincible. Are marine mammals invincible? It's a good question. They might be, or at least somewhat. So it turns out, as you know, one of the things that makes human beings vulnerable is cancer. And this is when the genes of the body, the genes that control the cell cycle, mutate, and those cells keep replicating to the point where that growth is out of control and it takes over and damages the body. So all animals suffer from cancer. This is something that is the nature of our biology and our cells. But whales live a very long time. Oh, that's cells that have, or genes that are involved in replication and cell death are blocked in cancerous cells. So one of the things that scientists discovered about whales is something titled or called Peto's paradox. And this was the posed question: why don't whales get more cancer? It turns out that whales and marine mammals don't seem to suffer from rates of cancer like other animals do. In fact, whales are some of the longest lived species on Earth. The bowhead whale, which I introduced to you earlier, bowheads can live over 200 years. So they're some of the longest lived, and they have some of the lowest cancer rates. So why is this? What affords them this super ability? Well, it turns out that they may have super DNA. So it turns out that whales have evolved more of what we call housekeeping genes. And these are genes that control the cell cycle and cell growth, and also, importantly, DNA repair. So when we experience something like solar radiation, the sun damages our cells, and then those cells then die. And it turns out that the whale genome has evolved many duplicates of tumor suppressing genes. So genes that prevent these tumors from forming, genes that are involved in repair and things like that. So this is actually fascinating to see this in large animals like this, and it's a possible area for future cancer treatment and research to understand more about how these genes work, to see if we can't find a cure for cancer by understanding how this works in animals, mammals in particular, so similar to us. And lastly, one of the most important jobs of a superhero, it seems to be, from my study, is that they are always out to save the world. They are do-gooders. And you might ask, are marine mammals also saving the world? What's the biggest challenge that we face as a society, on our planet today? Arguably, I believe that is climate change. It's the greatest threat to our planet in our time, at least. So what do whales have to do with this? Well, it turns out it all has to do with plankton. You're probably familiar with plankton. Plankton is the small microscopic plant that grows in the ocean, and it it's the largest source of oxygen on the planet. So 70% of the air we breathe is produced by plankton, actually, not the forests on land like many people might think, but in fact by plankton. And in addition, because it grows through photosynthesis, it captures carbon dioxide. It's also the largest carbon dioxide sink that our planet has. So that plankton grows, and then it captures that carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The thing with plankton, though, is that plankton only grows where the sunlight and the nutrients meet. So the sunlight is only penetrating the very top 100 meters or so of the surface, and the nutrients are all at the bottom. And so this creates a predicament. How do you get the nutrients from the bottom to mix with the sunlight at the top? Additionally, because the surface waters are quite lightweight in comparison to the colder, denser bottom layers, we get what's called a thermocline. And so this is like oil and water, and it's difficult for the bottom layers to mix with the top layers. And when they do, this is a process that we call upwelling. And it turns out whales have a role that is very similar to upwelling, and they can actually create an upward pump. It's called the whale pump. And the way this works is because whales are air-breathing mammals, and they feed on food that is deep down often, far beneath the littoral zone, or the area of the ocean where the sun shines. They feed deep down, and because they're air-breathing mammals, they do all kinds of business at the surface, including defecation. So they release what are called fecal plumes. And the feces of a whale is very convenient. Unlike fish, the feces of a whale actually floats rather than sinks. And in this way, it acts like a liquid fertilizer, because they're pumping nutrients from the bottom, from their food, from the deep, and releasing it at the surface. So their feces are rich in nitrogen and also in iron. And in fact, the concentration of iron in the feces of a whale is 10 million times higher than the concentration in regular seawater. So it's an incredibly good fertilizer for the ocean and for supporting the growth of plankton. So that makes whales ecosystem engineers. And this is actually a revelation that has solved a real mystery from our past. Because looking at whaling records and the number of whales that were hunted during the whaling days, for a long time, scientists were actually confused by this. They thought there was a mistake. There couldn't have been so many whales in the past. The math just didn't add up, because they thought there wouldn't be enough food to feed themselves. There wasn't enough plankton or zooplankton in the water for whales to have survived. But it turns out that whales were sustaining themselves. What they do is they fertilize the ocean and they create more food. So through this positive feedback loop. They fertilize the ocean, keep feeding from the deep. There's more plankton growing that feeds the zooplankton, that feeds the krill and the copepods and the fish. And so this cycle continues, and they keep the oceans growing. So with commercial whaling, after the period of whaling ended in the 70s, people asked, where did all the food go? So where did the krill go? And it turns out that, for example, in the Southern Ocean, which is the area that was probably most greatly impacted, the waters around Antarctica, most greatly impacted by whaling, it turns out that the krill have declined by about 50%. So without whales, there's about 50% less food in the ocean. So that's what's missing. And when we look at what we have now, we have fewer whales, we have more penguins, and we have more seals. But despite that, it doesn't quite add up. There seems to be less food available now that most of the large whales have been taken. In addition to that, and in addition to fertilizing the ocean, they also actually do a service for the ocean called biomixing. And this is just through the act of swimming. So because they take these dives, they go deep and they come back to the surface, they mix those surface layers through their body movements. And a lot of marine animals do this, including plankton and krill. They have a diurnal migration. And according to one hypothesis, all of the marine organisms, including whales, including krill, that move in the ocean, their body movements, just the movements themselves, actually produce enough energy, an equivalent amount of energy to mix the ocean as much as all of the wind and all of the tides combined. So this is an important service. And they're mixing the ocean for us, again, mixing those nutrient-rich layers with those surface layers. And they also, in addition to the vertical mixing, they also mix the ocean horizontally. So most people know that whales make long migrations. These migrations tend to be between areas that are rich in food, the colder waters like Antarctica and the Arctic and the coast of North America. And then they also migrate down to the tropics where they have their young. And so this horizontal mixing across the latitudes is really important for bringing nutrients to the tropical and nutrient poor areas. And so just to give you an example of how significant this is, blue whales in the Southern Ocean in Antarctic waters are currently at only 1% of their pre-whaling levels or population size. And it's estimated that this small number of whales, just a few thousand, actually contribute 88 tons of nitrogen to the tropical latitudes. When they migrate there to have their young, of course, their bodily processes continue. And so they fertilize the tropics, and they bring a lot of nutrients there all over the globe. So when it comes to saving the world, whales are basically climate warriors. They contribute to producing phytoplankton, and that phytoplankton helps to capture carbon, as you know. And in fact, one of the proposed solutions for climate change is to have what we call iron fertilization experiments, where they dump huge amounts of iron from land sources in, for example, the Southern Ocean, where there is an iron deficiency, probably partly due to the lack of whales. And instead, by releasing all of this iron into the ocean, that would stimulate the growth of phytoplankton, and that would stimulate the growth of more food, more carbon capture, and that kind of thing. So it's actually quite possible that they could use this as a solution equivalent to forests. So people always talk about planting trees because, of course, all things that are living store carbon in their bodies, and the larger and longer lived they are, the better. So trees grow and really large, and they live a long time. And so do whales. In fact, whales might be an even better solution because they live a long time, like the giant forests or giant sequoia trees. But instead, not to diss trees here, everyone loves trees, but whales are actually an even better carbon sink, because when they die, unlike trees, they will decay in the forest floor, and that carbon will be re-released into the atmosphere if they're not buried underground, where they might become coal in a few million years. But most trees are decomposed on the forest floor, and that carbon is re-released into the atmosphere. But when whales die, they create what's called deadfall carbon. So most whales will actually sink all the way to the bottom of the ocean. And the ocean, of course, can be quite deep. And so this is a really important carbon sink. Their large bodies sink to the bottom. And in fact, the fossil fuels, fossil meaning from animals, the fossil fuels that we burn today are the source of those are carbon from marine organisms that fell and sunk to the bottom of the ocean millions of years ago. So when a whale dies, it's continuing that cycle of sinking that carbon to the bottom of the ocean. And so more whales means more carbon sinking. And even in their death, that means whales are incredible do-gooders for our planet. So in conclusion, just to summarize a lot of information here about how awesome whales are. Whales defy the laws of physics in incredible ways with their ability to dive and to hold their breath and to dive at incredible speeds and to be absolutely massive. They are almost immortal. They have some special skills that allow them extreme longevity and to even avoid the plague of cancer. They are some of the biggest animals and loudest animals. And in the case of a humpback, they can almost fly. They have super strength, speed, and flexibility, and incredible adaptations that make them truly amazing. And they are saving the world. So my conclusion to you folks is that marine mammals are super duper, the true superheroes of our planet. So with that, I think I have some time for a few questions if there are any. Thank you so much for your attention and fascination with a topic near and dear to my heart, marine mammals.
All right, so we do have a couple of questions, and one fun one I just thought to start out with would be, what is your favorite whale?
Oh boy, it's hard to choose. It's like, but I have to say, a few animals have a very special place in my heart, and you may have noticed some repetition here. The bowhead whale is highly featured in my presentation because I think they are just so cool. And I did my master's degree studying bowhead whales in the Arctic because they are so rare to see and so special, and just these powerhouses. So I have to admit they are probably my favorite. But as far as animals to spend time with, humpback whales are always a delight because of their acrobatics that I talked about, and social interactions. So they're just incredibly amusing, and yeah. So probably bowheads, and then a close second, humpback whales.
Okay, someone wants to know if it is possible for a whale to drown.
For a whale to drown? Yes. So whales, you might be hard to imagine, but whales are conscious breathers. So that means we breathe automatically. We can sleep. We can, we don't have to worry about breathing or remembering to breathe. But whales actually have to consciously choose to breathe. And in fact, in early aquariums, the way they discovered their conscious breathing was through the use of an anesthetic with dolphins. So when you get an anesthetic, you get put to sleep. So marine mammals can't actually truly sleep, or they will forget to breathe. And so when a dolphin was given an anesthetic, unfortunately it died. And so this led to the discovery that they have to be conscious or they will drown. So whales will often, what they can do is actually they can turn off half of their brain at a time. And so they engage in something called logging. So they're sort of half asleep, resting half of their brain at the surface, while the other half is not. But if a whale is kept underwater, it will drown. So that's how killer whales will hunt other marine mammals. They will hold them underwater, and eventually they will drown. And certainly if you don't allow an animal to get enough air when it comes up to the surface, then it can quickly, being unable to replenish its oxygen stores, it can then drown.
All right, and then the question, and I believe another group missed the beginning, so this will be beneficial for them too. But what got you into marine mammals? What inspired you?
So I grew up in the Northwest Territories in northern Canada, and this place is nowhere near the ocean. And I think, like most kids, I was fascinated with whales. I think they're incredible and charismatic, and I loved killer whales. But I didn't really see myself in marine biology because I just really hadn't been exposed to the ocean. So I started out in wildlife biology and pre-veterinary medicine when I went away to do my degree. And then I took my first marine biology course, and it changed my life forever. I fell in love with the ocean. I realized that's where I belong. The ocean was just such an incredibly fascinating place. Every time I'm on a boat, I feel like it's a bit of a miracle. You could see anything. The surprises are endless, and no day is the same on the ocean. So that turned my mind back toward the marine ecosystems. And then when it comes to marine mammals, of course, because they're fascinating. But as far as a research subject, I actually find that even though they're difficult to study, they're some of the most important and engaging from an educational standpoint, from a societal standpoint. Because when you understand marine mammals and you protect marine mammals through proper conservation and management, then you're protecting huge ecosystems. Because as I talked about, they cover the entire ocean. They make huge migrations. And so in order to conserve marine mammals, we have to conserve so much of the ocean. And so in that way, that moved me towards to a focus on marine mammals.
Okay, why are orcas seen as aggressive animals?
Yeah, well, some of them are. So like all intelligent species, we're complicated. Human beings, of course, are the most intelligent species on the planet. And killer whales are the most intelligent, arguably the most intelligent species in the ocean. And they also exhibit very complex social behaviors because they learn through play. So people have probably seen videos online of killer whales attacking, small seal pups and playing with the seal for many hours, and and then even sometimes playing with their food and not even eating it. And so it sort of seems cruel. The reason for that play is because they are extremely intelligent predators and they learn through play. And so just 2 weeks ago, a colleague of mine in Antarctica witnessed a pod of killer whales playing with a young humpback whale calf. And it was the adult killer whales didn't engage. They stood off on the side. And it was the young animals that were practicing chasing the animal, playing with it, trying to drown it. And then once they were done playing, they just swam off, and the humpback whale swam off. And it was just a play session. But they were, of course, learning how to be predators and how to be the top of the food chain. So that's what explains that behavior. And that's consistent with most intelligent animals, chimpanzees, human beings, not being exceptions.
Okay, and then we had a question from Faith Mata. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, but they ask, how can surgery be performed on marine mammals, like veterinary procedures, I'm assuming, if anesthesia can't be used?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's quite difficult, but as you know, with minor surgeries, you can use local anesthesia. And then also animals, yeah, there are sophisticated ways to simulate artificial breathing in an animal that if you need to do something more serious. But most they don't undergo complex medical procedures like human beings do, knee replacements and things like that. So for the most part, local anesthetic is the way to go. So it's just localizing a small part of the body rather than making the entire body unconscious.
Okay, someone wanted to know, what animals hunt whales?
Or are there any animals that hunt whales?
Yes. In fact, just 2 days or yesterday, I was in Antarctica hanging out with some leopard seals, and they hunt other seals, and they also hunt penguins. So they're predators down in Antarctica, as are killer whales, hence the name. It's mostly appropriate, even though according to my cartoon here, they may not appreciate it. But certainly there are predators and land predators, in fact, in the Arctic. Polar bears can hunt marine mammals. They hunt beluga whales and narwhals and things like that. So there are even some land predators of whales. But killer whales are probably the most infamous and most well-known predator of the ocean that feed on other whales.
All right, and then we had another question, which I'm just trying to find again from a Megan Porter, and it was basically just asking, do you think it's possible that we can exist like as a society, as humans, without whales, without the contributions they make to the environment?
Wow, that's a tough question. I think if we got to a place where there weren't marine mammals left, we would be in a very desperate situation indeed. We are, of course, part of the ecosystem, and we're learning more and more day by day of how integrated, we are with our ecosystems and how dependent we are, whether it be the biomes of our intestines that are important for us to flourish, and whether it be the ecosystems of our oceans that we rely on for food. And if we get to a situation where whales don't exist, it's not a place I would want to live, and not because I love whales so much, but because it would be a huge degradation to the ecosystem. So, I'm not sure about the actual answer, whether or not it's possible. If you remove them completely, it'd still have plankton and fish and things like that, but certainly it would be a lesser world for sure.
And then another question is, how fast can the fastest whale swim?
The fastest whale. Yeah, dolphins are probably clocked at the fastest. And when they do this, by the way, they're cheating, in my opinion, because they are porpoising. So they're moving through the water, but then of course they're able to what we call porpoise. They say jump in and out of the water. So that dramatically increases their speed. When they move through air, of course, there's much less resistance. But yeah, dolphins are probably the fastest. Killer whales are extremely fast. And like I say, the largest or the fastest large whale, which is probably the most profound, is the fin whale, and they can go up to 50 kilometers per hour. And they're, they're like a freight train. I mean, they're massive animals. So.
And we had another question when you were going over the like whales and cancer thing, and it was basically like, are whales' lifespans ever impacted by like having cancer, or do they just go about their days?
But that's the mystery. So, of course, we experience cancer and causes of cancer from various different sources, sunlight, etc., but also just through the environment and through natural processes. Even if you were not exposed to the sun or chemicals, our cells age and mutations happen in our bodies, and that's natural. And so you can still get cancer. It's part of life. And so that's the mystery with whales, is that according to studies, the whales seem to experience much lower rates of cancer than other species do. And it's not because they live in water. It's simply because, or it appears to be because they have this unique ability, or these housekeeper genes. And it's the same reason why they are long-lived. So the longevity is determined by our cell's ability to continue to replicate, right? So our cell has a life cycle. And if you understand the cell life cycle, it only has a certain number of replications or times that a single cell can multiply. But if you can repair that cell instead of having to divide and replace itself, then you can actually increase the time that a cell can live. So by repairing cells instead of replacing them, then animals can live a lot longer. So it seems to be an adaptation for longevity, not necessarily to avoid cancer, but it's a byproduct. And it's, again, one of the reasons why they live a long time, because cancer is, a major cause of death in all animal species if they get to live to a long age and they're not eaten by a killer whale.
How high can humpback whales jump?
How high? Well, not so high. What we call, we like to rate killer whale or humpback whale jumps by how far they come out of the water. So sometimes only part of the body comes out of the water, but it's a full 10 out of 10 when the tail completely clears the water. So usually just above the surface. But again, the 45-ton animal. So yeah, that's it's a very big animal, and it's a unique ability indeed.
And then we've had a couple of questions asking like how long have like orcas and like whales in general like been around?
Yeah, they evolved millions of years ago. So the killer whale, I didn't explain this in the talk due to limited time, but the two types of whales, toothed whales like killer whales, and then baleen whales like the blue whales are a little bit different. They evolved millions of years ago from a land ancestor. So from a land mammal, similar to, imagine their ancestor being something like a hippo. And so a hippo, of course, is a land animal, but they live and feed in the water, and they're quite happy there, and they happen to have legs and walk around. So whales were simply a hippo-like animal that found it so advantageous to spend their time in the water that they have slowly evolved greater and greater adaptation to water. And then at some point, there was no turning back, and they were permanently water animals, and they lost their ability to exist on land. But there are marine mammals that, of course, have that crossover ability. So some of our seals and sea lions, they're marine mammals too, and they are a little bit more, in between. They spend time on land, they kind of walk around, they haul out, and they even have their babies and give birth on land, and then spend the rest of their time in the ocean. So, but whales are fully invested. So they've lost their ability to exist on land. And in fact, because they get so big, and they can get so big partly because living in water, there's no strain on their bodies. If you were a huge animal like a dinosaur, you have to have a lot of muscles to hold up your muscles and to fight the gravity or the gravitational pull and the weight of yourself. But when you're in water, of course, because water is dense, you can actually get a lot bigger and a lot denser. And that's what allows these large animals to get so big and so dense in water. So when a whale strands, you often see strandings in the news when they strand because of their body weight, because they are so dense and they're typically in water. When they're on land or beached for a long period of time, the weight of their own bodies actually slowly begins to crush their organs under that weight. And in addition, they also become superheated because, of course, they're adapted to the cold water, and they quickly get overheated on land. And so, yeah, they're fully adapted to living in the water.
All right. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have. Our next presentation will be starting soon. So thank you once again, Deanna Leonard, for coming and telling us all about orcas and killer whales. Thank you everyone for attending. And we have one last announcement before we all sign off. The National Biodiversity Teach-In is a student project that happens because we have so many wonderful partners who support us. One of those partners is Earth Echo International, and they are an organization that encourages people to create a healthy and thriving environment. And currently, right now, they have a challenge going on called the R-Echo Challenge that empowers and engages young problem solvers in understanding, respecting, and protecting the amazing diversity of species essential for the future of our planet. So this year, they're very excited to open the challenge competition to students in the US, grades 5 through 9. 10 finalist teams will advance for a chance to win top prizes of $1,000, $25,000, and $5,000. If you would like more information on this contest, please email us. We will be happy to provide that. Once again, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.